She stepped through the doorway like a woman carrying the weight of an entire hospital on her shoulders, her scrubs wrinkled, her bun collapsing, the faint smell of antiseptic trailing behind her like a ghost of the place she'd just left. Her bag slipped from her arm and hit the floor with a dull thud. Her shoes kicked off without a thought. She didn't meet my eyes, not fully, just a quick glance, a faint smile that didn't quite reach her face, and a muttered, "It's been nonstop." She sank into the couch as though gravity had doubled in our living room, rubbing her temple, her whole body speaking one language, exhaustion. I asked if she wanted tea, food, anything, but she shook her head. It used to be that after long shifts, she would fall into my arms, holding me as though my presence was the one thing that could still ground her. But lately, she no longer reached for me. The space between us felt heavier than her fatigue. I told myself she was just tired, that the glow she used to have would return when she rested. But that night, as I watched her stare off into nothing, I couldn't shake the feeling that her mind was somewhere else entirely. And when I found out where, everything changed. If you've ever laid next to someone who made you feel completely alone, then maybe this story isn't just mine, it's ours. And if that's true, subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard by those who understand. That night, after she claimed she was too tired to even finish her tea and went upstairs early, the house felt heavier than usual. It wasn't just a quiet. It was the kind of silence that settles after a storm, where the air still feels charged with something unspoken. I sat there in the dim glow of the lamp, my eyes fixed on the mug she'd left on the coffee table, the steam already gone. Her footsteps upstairs had been slow, almost careful, like she didn't want me to hear. That detail shouldn't have mattered, but it did. I kept thinking about the way her shoulders had slumped when she walked in the door earlier, a performance exhaustion that somehow felt too precise, as though it was meant to be noticed and accepted without question. I tried to brush it off. After all, she was a nurse, and exhaustion was part of the job, but something in her expression had betrayed her. Her smile hadn't reached her eyes, and those eyes, they had looked right through me. I unlocked my phone and scrolled without purpose, pretending to be distracted, but every notification that popped up made me think of the ones I wasn't getting from her anymore. Once upon a time, she'd send me messages in the middle of her shift, a quick miss you, a picture of her lunch, a story about a patient who made her laugh. But now, her texts had become short, delayed, and void of warmth. When I asked about her day, her answers felt pre-packaged, like a script she rehearsed just enough to keep suspicion at bay. And yet, I could feel it. That subtle shift you can't put into words, the one that makes your chest ache without any physical reason. I sat there for nearly an hour, the TV off, the room so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the kitchen. My reflection stared back at me in the darkened screen, and I didn't recognize a man looking back. His eyes weren't relaxed. They were searching for something that wouldn't come unless I went looking for it myself. A part of me wanted to push aside, to chalk it up to paranoia, but deep down I knew. The truth was out there, and it was already closer than I dared to imagine. And the moment I found it, there would be no going back. I don't care about algorithms. I care about the people listening to this who are bleeding silently like I did. If you've ever held back tears just to protect someone who didn't protect you, subscribe. You don't have to do this alone anymore. The next morning, I woke before her, which was unusual. She was normally up at dawn, showered, dressed, and halfway through her coffee before I'd even thought about moving. But that day, she lay in bed longer, eyes closed, as if postponing the inevitable. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, her favorite tea, thinking maybe I could read her face in the quiet of the kitchen. Maybe I could find the truth in the way she buttered her bread or sipped her cup. She eventually came down in her robe, hair loosely tied, muttering something about not feeling rested and another long shift ahead. She kissed my cheek with a softness that was almost strategic, like she knew it was a gesture I'd measure, file away, and think about later. Over the table, I asked her about her schedule, trying to keep my tone casual. She said she was covering for a colleague again, the same one she mentioned 2 nights ago, and that the hospital was short-staffed. Her voice carried the weight of inconvenience, but her eyes, they flicked down to her tea too quickly, as if the truth was hiding at the bottom of the cup. I nodded, pretending to accept it, but something inside me had already shifted. Later that day, while she showered, I passed by the bedroom where her phone lay on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a new notification. Not from the hospital. Not from a friend I recognized, but from a name I'd never seen before. The preview was short, just a few words, but they didn't sound like the exhausted exchanges of coworkers in crisis. They sounded alive, curious, warm. I didn't touch the phone, didn't unlock it. Not yet, but in that moment, the knot in my stomach tightened into something unshakable. I told myself I wasn't going to become the kind of person who snoops, who digs through another's private world for answers they're too afraid to hear. But the truth was already in motion. The first crack had formed, and no matter how much I wanted to plaster over it, I knew the fracture would only spread. The question was no longer if I would discover something. It was when, and deep down, I feared the moment I did, because I knew it would change everything I thought I understood about her and about us. That night, she left for her extended shift again, but this time I didn't just sit in the living room and wait for the sound of her keys in the door. The unease that had been growing in me all week had turned into something sharper. Not anger yet, but a heavy, watchful alertness. I told myself I wasn't going to jump to conclusions, but my instincts wouldn't let me stay still. Around 9:45 p.m., I glanced at the clock and thought about her being in surgery, wrapped in sterile light, hands gloved, voice calm and professional. That's what I wanted to believe. But the truth was, my mind kept circling back to that unfamiliar name on her phone. So, I did something I'd never done before. I opened the GPS app. We both use to share locations with each other, a habit we'd started years ago out of convenience, not suspicion. Her dot was there, pulsing, but it wasn't where the hospital was supposed to be. It wasn't even close. She was across town, in a quiet neighborhood I barely recognized. My chest tightened as I zoomed in, and the street view loaded, rows of small houses, dim porch lights, and the occasional glow of a TV flickering through curtains. No ER bays. No ambulance sirens. No hospital staff rushing in and out. My mind scrambled for excuses. Maybe she'd been called out for an at-home patient emergency. Maybe there was a family friend in trouble, maybe. But every maybe felt thinner than the one before. I sat there, staring at the map, my hand frozen on the mouse. My brain tried to cling to the woman I thought I knew. The nurse who stayed late for emergencies, who came home bone-tired but proud, who'd once cried in a car because she couldn't save a patient. But as the minutes passed, the dot on the map didn't move, and each second felt like a nail sealing something shut inside me. At 11:07 p.m., a notification lit up my phone. Not from her, but from Instagram. It was her account. She'd posted to her story. My pulse jumped. I opened it before I could think. The screen filled with an image that made my mouth go dry. She was sitting at a table, wine glass in hand, across from someone whose face I couldn't fully see, just the curve of his jaw, the edge of a smirk. Behind them, a warm-lit restaurant, soft jazz in the background, not a single trace of surgical scrubs, not a single shadow of exhaustion. I stared at it, my ears ringing. It wasn't the kind of post you made by mistake. It wasn't for me, and yet it was there, public enough for anyone to see, except I realized I shouldn't have been able to see it at all. She must have forgotten I still had access to her close friends list. The intimacy of that oversight hit harder than the wine in her hand. That was the moment the last piece of doubt began to crumble, replaced by a cold clarity that felt nothing like the man I'd been a week ago. But I didn't message her. I didn't call. I just sat there, phone in hand, letting the image burn into me, because I knew, whatever came next, this was a night I'd never forget. When she finally walked through the door just after midnight, the smell hit me first. Not antiseptic or latex gloves or the faint trace of the cafeteria's burnt coffee, but something warm, spiced, and unmistakably foreign to a hospital shift. It clung to her hair, her clothes, her skin, like she'd been wrapped in for hours. My stomach tightened, and my mind flashed back to the GPS map, the glowing dot in that quiet neighborhood, the Instagram story still lingering in my recent views. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile people use when they want to look tired but content, the one she'd worn countless times after real surgeries. I watched her drop her bag by the door and kick off her shoes without looking at me, as if the motion had been rehearsed. I wanted to speak, to ask where she'd really been, to demand an explanation for the glass of wine and the man's half-hidden smile, but something in me stopped. Maybe it was the fear of hearing a truth I couldn't unhear. Maybe it was a sudden awareness that I wasn't ready for the collapse that would follow. Instead, I just studied her. Every movement felt magnified. The way she pulled her hair loose and shook it out, the way her eyes avoided mine, the way she let out a small, performative sigh as if to punctuate her exhaustion. But under that, I could sense something else, a current of energy that didn't match the act. Her steps were too light, her skin too flushed, her voice, when she finally spoke, too bright for someone claiming to have spent the last 8 hours in a sterile operating room. She asked me if I had eaten. It was almost comical, the way she tried to fold back into the rhythm of our evenings, as though the night hadn't been punctured by her own carelessness. I answered flatly, just enough to keep the silence from becoming a weapon. Inside, though, my thoughts were screaming. I was replaying every detail, the coordinates, the photo, the timestamp, and each time I did, the weight of proof grew heavier. But I wasn't ready to throw it on the table yet. No, I wanted to see how far she would carry the lie. I wanted to know just how skilled she had become at building a world where she could stand in front of me, look into my eyes, and pretend nothing had shifted. So I asked the simplest question I could, my voice steady, almost casual. How was surgery tonight? She didn't blink, didn't hesitate. She slipped into the story effortlessly, too effortlessly, describing a patient's condition, a minor complication, the way her hands ached from holding the retractor for so long. It was textbook, perfect, believable. And yet, in every polished detail, I heard the absence of truth. I watched her speak, knowing that behind her words was a different scene entirely, one lit by candlelight, not fluorescent bulbs. And as I listened, I felt something shift in me. Not rage, not heartbreak, but resolve. I knew this was only the beginning, and the next move would be mine. That if this sounds like your life, stop pretending you're fine. Stop hiding it like I did. Subscribe, not for me, but for every person who thought they were crazy until the truth finally shattered them. You're safe here. We see you. I didn't react that night. I let her words pour over me like cold water, numbing me instead of burning. But inside, every sentence she spoke was being filed away, stored next to the evidence I already had. I realized that exposing her in a burst of anger would give her the advantage. She'd cry, deny, twist the story into something that made me look paranoid. No, if I was going to end this, I had to be surgical, methodical, the way she claimed to be every night in the OR. Over the next few days, I became an actor in my own life. I played the role of the loving, slightly distracted husband, while behind the curtain, I was mapping her lies. Every time she claimed to have a late shift, I noted the exact time she left, the time she returned, the route her GPS took. I cross-referenced it with her social media, the likes she left, the photos that slipped through her friends' stories. Small details, harmless on their own, but together they began to form a picture she didn't know I was painting. I started keeping my phone close, ready to screenshot anything suspicious. Text previews that lit up her screen when she thought I wasn't looking. Odd payment notifications from restaurants she'd never mentioned. A delivery receipt for flowers I never sent. Each one was a thread, and I was slowly weaving them into a net she couldn't slip through. But what I needed most was patience. I wanted her to believe she was untouchable, to get comfortable enough in her double life that she'd slip. And when she slipped, I'd be there, not just with a single damning photo, but with a timeline so airtight she couldn't wriggle free. I didn't realize it then, but the longer I waited, the more the waiting changed me. I wasn't just hunting for proof anymore. I was preparing myself for the moment I'd have to face the truth out loud. And with each day that passed, I knew that moment was getting closer. The crack in her story was coming. And when it did, I'd make sure the whole thing collapsed. It happened on a Wednesday night, one of those evenings where the air felt heavy, like it was carrying a storm you couldn't see yet. She'd left for what she claimed was an emergency call at the hospital, her phone buzzing just before dinner, her voice hurried but strangely calm. She didn't even touch the plate I'd prepared. She just kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her bag, and said, "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." Normally, I would have taken that at face value, but by then, my trust was already in pieces, each shard sharp enough to cut me when I turned it over in my mind. As soon as she walked out, I checked the GPS tracker app I'd quietly installed on her phone weeks earlier. At first, it showed her heading toward the hospital. I almost thought, maybe tonight she's telling the truth. But then, 3 blocks before reaching the hospital, her blue location veered off. Not toward a medical facility, but into a quiet residential neighborhood I didn't recognize. I stared at that for over 10 minutes, unmoving, my dinner going cold beside me. Then something happened that snapped the last fragile string of denial I had left. Her location didn't change, but her Instagram story lit up with a new post. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't her face. It was a dimly lit table, 2 wine glasses, the reflection of someone's hand, a man's hand, resting far too comfortably near hers. The caption read, "Finally, a night worth remembering." I couldn't breathe, not because of the betrayal. I had suspected that for weeks, but because she had been reckless enough to leave a public trail. That wasn't just carelessness. It was arrogance. And arrogance meant she felt untouchable. In that moment, the hunter in me woke up. This was my crack in the wall. I could use this, but I also knew I had to be careful. The next move wasn't about confronting her. It was about following her deeper into her own trap until she handed me everything I needed. The stage was set. I just had to wait for her to make her next mistake. And I knew it was coming sooner than she thought. The moment she walked through the door that night, I knew she wasn't coming from the hospital. It wasn't just the absence of that sterile, clinical smell on her scrubs. It was a faint trace of something sweeter, heavier, the unmistakable scent of a man's cologne that didn't belong to me. She smiled casual, as if nothing in the world was out of place. But I had the image from her Instagram burned into my mind. The wine glasses, the dim light, the hand that wasn't mine. I didn't say anything at first. I let her put down her bag, take off her shoes, and wander into the kitchen like she always did. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. But I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about evidence. Every lie she told me now was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. "Long night?" I asked, leaning against the counter, watching her too closely. "Yeah," she replied without hesitation. Surgery ran late. I barely had time to breathe. And there it was, the biggest lie of them all, delivered with the ease of someone who thought I was still blind. I wanted to throw my phone on the counter, show her the GPS trail, the Instagram story, the proof that I wasn't a fool she thought I was. But instead, I just nodded and let her talk. The more she spoke, the deeper she dug herself. Because here's the thing. She didn't know that I had already been in contact with someone who confirmed the man's identity. She didn't know that her emergency call had coincided perfectly with a reservation for 2 at a quiet restaurant downtown. And she didn't know that the next time she walked out that door, I'd be right behind her, not just watching, but ready to end the game completely. I had all the pieces now. All I had to do was decide how to play them. And when the truth finally came crashing down, it wouldn't just be her life that changed. It would be mine too if you come this far. That means something. You felt this. You lived it. Maybe not this exact story, but your own version of it. So if you're still here, still breathing under the weight of something they'll never apologize for, hit subscribe. Because no one should walk through this kind of betrayal alone. And if no one else says it, I will. I'm glad you're still here.